This is how I made my animation Krampus in training. So the first thing I did is I fully rendered the background and I tried to position it according to the sequence that I chose. So since he starts out falling out of the chimney, the fireplace is on the left and the Christmas tree is on the right. So the scene overall reads from left to right and it's just easier for the viewer to see. I prefer to have the background fully rendered, first of all, because it makes the scene easier to block out, but also I have an established color scheme from the beginning. So when I eventually render the character directly into the animation over the background, I can just color pick from the background itself. So for example, the red on Krampus's sleeve is the same as the red on the carpet or on the stocking. That way I don't have a slightly different red on the character as on the background, because that would just look weird. Then I made a sketch over the scene. This isn't meant to be super detailed or even look anything like the final product. It just has to look right enough where I know how the scene is supposed to look. You have the primary actions, as you can see. I just have 4 frames. And then slowly I start animating the in-between sketches, so I have something that kind of looks like at least the movement of what the final scene is supposed to look like. Sorry if you hear my door, it's really windy outside. Anyway, the next thing I render is the props. So these are the things which the only way they're going to move at all is in rotation and scale. So I don't have to stay drawing them from scratch every time they're in a frame. Like the present, which only rotates a few times and then it's the same for the rest of the animation. The jingle bell, or at least the base of it, because then I have to position the lighting and the shading while it rotates. But halia. You can see that the background is still while I'm animating, but I made a separate video where the Christmas lights are flashing and when Krampus falls, the candles go out and the photos move. That's also props which I animated in the beginning and forgot about until the end. There's not much to say about the line art other than sometimes if the head was going to look very similar in one frame to another, I would just rotate it instead of drawing the head all over again. And if the body, for example, was similar in one frame to another, I would just copy paste, little cheats here and there. Honestly, looking back, I should be given some kind of award because this onion skin is a nightmare to look at and I don't know how I managed to interpret it semi-correctly. To start coloring, I turned off animation assist and deleted all of those layers that I don't need because that looks crazy with all of the layers on screen. And I created an empty layer underneath the line art layer and I started coloring on that. And as I mentioned, the coloring was mostly color picking. So for the red, I color picked from the red parts on the background, green from the green parts on the background, etc. I also color picked from the same color line art that I used in the background for each segment of color on the character. So for example, the little fluffy white part, I used the same line art color as I used on the window, and you get the point. I've spoken enough about this. So yeah, then in a different Procreate file, I made this little portal thing, and then I imported the frames into the animation that I was working on. So there he goes. And then I noticed as I was watching the animation back that the physics on the jingle bell as it rolls doesn't look right. It just doesn't look realistic. So I went to this little bowling ball bounce gif that I had saved and I made a sketch of that, and then I saved the sketch as a gif transparently so then I could take it into Video Leap and layer it over the existing animation that I'd done so I could get an idea of how it's supposed to look like. I drew a curve as a reference, as a guide of how the bell is supposed to move in a swinging motion into the portal and drew that. Then on certain layers I applied a bit of a motion blur to make it look even faster. These blue lines that you see are a guideline for me of how the chain moves so then I can see it easier in the onion skin when I go to draw the chain. I went back and added some smear frames, for example, when Krampus falls out of the chimney and when he waves his arms around. I think it just looks better. So then I just finally made the dust cloud that I had been procrastinating drawing, and pretty simple sketch, line art, some little squigglies to make it look nicer, I guess, and that's it. Back with the blue lines, here I'm drawing a guideline for how Krampus pulls the bell back into the portal, and then I'm drawing the chain over it. So then obviously I had to find a way to have the chain showing up from the very beginning. So I worked kind of backwards. I had this final laying down position of the chain and I tried to work backwards to see how it ended up in that position. For the parts with the chain that's still at least partly covered in soot, I first did it all black, so at least I got the movement of the chain, and then I rendered where was necessary, basically. Then I put these little lights on his horns. I wasn't sure if I was going to have time to do them, but I really wanted to, and I realized that I did, in fact, have some time to do them, so here they are. Oh yeah, also the little prank gift cockroach spring, which I left to the last minute, because again, it's one of those like props which I only have to move very slightly. Now the editing process. Okay, so I took it into Video Leap and I layered my little animation over the little Christmas lights flashing background that I had made in the very beginning. I also cropped out the little section of the stuff that's on the fireplace and put it in like the corner so it meshes in with the background and I can time it correctly so the candles go out when he hits the bottom of the chimney. I made this brown circle in Procreate and then I took it into Video Leap as an overlay layer over the actual animation. I set the blending mask to multiply and then I adjusted the keyframe so it would basically follow every single object that needed the shadow. I added a blur effect on the background in the beginning that would fade into the fully focused background, and while it was blurred, I put in the little title card that I made in Procreate. I made like a short intro music thing in GarageBand, which I layered over the intro section. I added many sound effects, as you can see, and this crazy like camera shake effect. Then I went into an app called Prequel and I chose some filter that added these like lens flares and sparkles and just made the scene look more saturated and warm. And that's what you see in the end.